Natasha, don't slouch.
I'm not slouching.
You're going to get a back hunch.
Listen to your mother.
Oh my God, this.
Up.
All right, enough, all of you.
I didn't say anything. That's not fair.
The final trailer for Black Widow is out, and it reveals a little bit more of the movie's story. But it's also loaded with tie-ins to the MCU, and it could provide a big hint about who the new Avengers are going to face in their next movie. So let's go through this trailer shot by shot. Starting off, we're in a remote area, probably someplace like Alaska, and we see this trailer. Now, I think this is where Natasha is hiding out. Notice she's wearing her comfies and she's not in any kind of battle suit, implying that this is her home. She's creeping through the trailer like she has an intruder. Now, if this is early in the movie, then I doubt if this is the authorities. It could be a widow assassin that she defeats and this draws her back into her old life. But I think this could actually be O.T. Fagbinley's character. Now, you may know him from playing Luke on The Handmaid's Tale. Until today, he hasn't appeared in any marketing, but now he's on the Black Widow poster. He's playing a former S.H.I.E.L.D. agent named Rick Mason. I have a couple more theories on his role that I'll get into in just a second, but I think it's likely that he catches up to Natasha, and as an old friend, he gives her some info that the Red Room is training widows again. The Red Room, by the way, is where Natasha and several other women train to become Black Widow assassins. We've seen glimpses of it on Age of Ultron and in the Peggy Carter TV series. Moving on, we see a couple shots of the prison break sequence that's appeared in several trailers. This is where they rescue David Harbour's character, Alexei Shostakov, aka the Red Guardian. He's the Soviet Union version of Captain America. Now, this trailer has been a little deceitful, as Marvel trailers tend to be. There are actually two flying sequences with two completely different ships. There's this prison rescue where Yelena is flying a helicopter and dropping off Natasha. Later, she shoots a rocket out of the side at this mountain to cause an avalanche while someone else is flying. But there's another flying machine that probably appears much later in the movie. This one that Rachel Weisz is flying is not a helicopter. Notice there are no rotary blades on top, or this guy would have been given the big Nazi treatment from Raiders. So, where does this ship come from? Well, let me break down what we can see of the movie's timeline. Natasha goes to Budapest. She meets her former colleague Yelena. In the comics, Yelena was an assassin who was supposed to kill Natasha and take her place as Black Widow. But here they're like sisters or literal sisters.
It's good to see you too, sis.
So the two of them are chased by widows and then by Taskmaster in a tank. They break Alexei out of jail, and then they retreat to Rachel Weisz's house for dinner. Later in the trailer, we see a small house surrounded by flying hovercraft. Not helicopters, there's no blades. Not Quinjets, there's no repulsor technology underneath. This is a new kind of hovercraft. Taskmaster is on one of these ships, and later this is the same kind of craft that Rachel Weisz is flying. Now, judging by these shots, it looks like the team is inside the house. They're surrounded and they have to fight their way out. Then they steal one of these hovercraft and they use it in the final fight that we see later in the trailer. Then we see a little bit more of this sequence on the bridge where Taskmaster attacks Natasha.
Before I was an Avenger, I made mistakes. And a lot of enemies.
Now, I think this happens very early in the movie while she's still hiding out in Alaska or wherever. In the comics, Taskmaster can copy the fighting moves of anyone he observes. That's why in this trailer alone, he imitates the fighting styles of 5 different heroes. There's Natasha, Captain America's shield throw, Hawkeye's use of a bow and arrow, Black Panther's claws, and Spider-Man's web slinging. The big question on everyone's mind is, who is the Taskmaster? In the past, I theorized that Rachel Weisz's character, Melina Vostokov, was a secret villain. In the comics, Melina is the villain Iron Maiden. But the last trailer saw her fighting Taskmaster, and we've pretty much seen every main character in the same room as this villain at some point. Again, Marvel trailers lie. But this is what they want us to be doing, guys, endlessly speculating about every frame instead of looking at the most obvious answer. So I think that Natasha's old pal Mason is going to end up being the Taskmaster. They introduce him early at this mobile home as a good guy, so later the Scooby-Doo reveal will actually mean something.
Just as we thought.
It's the curator, Mr. Wickles.
Now think about it. If Mason was a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent, he would have access to all sorts of video of her different fighting styles. He could have worked alongside Black Widow, Hawkeye, and Captain America. Okay, so then how did Mason steal Black Panther's fighting moves? Well, S.H.I.E.L.D. knew that Wakanda existed, judging by Nick Fury's map in Iron Man 2. So Mason could have been studying T'Challa as well. Or he just subscribed to Peter Parker's YouTube channel.
Okay, there's Captain America, Iron Man, Black Widow.
At one point, Taskmaster is even watching Natasha's fight from Iron Man 2, a fight that took place inside Hammer Industries. Now, I'm sure that S.H.I.E.L.D. sees that footage as classified material to protect Natasha's undercover identity. So if Mason was a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent, he would have had access to this as well. Now no, it's not the most shocking reveal, but Marvel also didn't tell us who Jude Law was playing in Captain Marvel, just to preserve the obvious reveal that he was playing the villain. Tell me who you think Taskmaster could be in the comments. Little detail here, I love how Taskmaster's visor is mirrored to symbolize that he's copying his opponent's moves and creating a mirror image of themselves. Now notice Natasha's car is hit with a red laser bolt, very similar to the red lasers on Natasha's new suit that we saw in the last trailer, implying that all of this technology is coming from the same place. Moving on, we see the other widows training in the Red Room, and Yelena tells us,
"They're manipulated, fully conscious but no choices."
Now, mind control technology has been introduced in the MCU before, and I'm not talking about the Mind Stone. The hypnotist villain, Dr. Faustus, was introduced in the Peggy Carter TV series, and Hydra improved on his abilities and creates the Faustus system, which mind controls people Clockwork Orange style. So again, if Taskmaster were a former S.H.I.E.L.D. operative and Hydra was part of S.H.I.E.L.D., then he would also have access to this technology. But they could also be mind controlling these women in another way. In the previous trailer, Natasha was holding vials of red liquid, and so is her Funko Pop toy. So what if this vial is some kind of modified super soldier serum that also works as a mind control device? After Yelena says,
"Fully conscious but no choices,"
it cuts to her strapped down on an operating table. Now notice, by the way, the Widow emblem on her belt buckle. It's a nice small touch. Immediately, this image calls to mind the procedure that Natasha flashed back to in Age of Ultron. In that film, they implied this was her being sterilized so she couldn't have children.
In the Red Room, where I was trained, they have a graduation ceremony. They sterilize you.
But what if this was actually Natasha undergoing some sort of procedure to be mind controlled? That could be what's happening to Yelena in this shot. In this shot, Rachel Weisz is standing in a hospital hallway, making me think maybe she's about to rescue Yelena from her procedure. Natasha says,
We have to go back to where it all started, so they never do that to anyone again.
and we've seen this location several times before. This is the room with the maps and the antiquated office materials from the first trailer. This also looks like it's the command center for the Red Room. I'm going to guess that this shot is a flashback, and this is young Natasha receiving orders from Ray Winstone's mysterious Black Widow character. Could also be Dreykov, who was mentioned in this line from the Avengers.
Dreykov's daughter.
Later, she fights off all the widows in a room with these same windows. So now let's talk about these clips that show Natasha and her family surrounded by wreckage as a caravan of authorities approaches. This is the aftermath of the Falling with Style battle with Taskmaster that we see here. Now notice the parachute billowing behind her, implying how she survived this fall. Except now, we actually have some context for this fight. Natasha leaps out of this window, which has the same windows that we see here and here. This leap from the tower is a direct callback to this panel from the Black Widow comic. Then she's falling and fighting Taskmaster on this wreckage. Judging by how high up they are, this is probably some kind of flying fortress, like a S.H.I.E.L.D. helicarrier. Again, if Taskmaster was a former S.H.I.E.L.D. agent, he would have had access to this technology. But it's also possible the Soviet government and the Red Room developed their own floating fortress technology. See, a lot of the tech that we see could be knockoffs of Howard Stark's work. Years ago, Howard had a partner, Anton Vanko. They split and Howard had him deported. Now, years later, his son Ivan used Stark and Vanko's repulsor designs to become Whiplash. But remember, Howard was also replicating Steve Rogers' super soldier serum. So maybe Vanko helped with this too and gave a version of this to Alexei, making him the Red Guardian. This could also be the mysterious red vials that Natasha was holding.
Well, that'll be easy to remember.
So it's also possible that the Soviet Union developed their own helicarrier that was more of a flying fortress. There's more evidence of possible Vanko tech in Melina's armory. This looks like a version of her Iron Maiden mask from the comics.
Iron Maiden? Excellent!
If Ivan could use his father's old arc reactor designs to build his Whiplash suit, then maybe Soviet scientists created their own form of an Iron Man suit. This suit wouldn't have been as sophisticated as Stark's, but it could have been developed from the same early designs. And those designs became the armor for the Iron Maiden. Finally, let's talk about Thunderbolt Ross in these trailers because this is confusing as hell. In the first trailer, Ross appears looking de-aged and standing in front of a Hungarian truck, implying, okay, this is Budapest, it must be a flashback. But here, he's with a very similar caravan, the one that appears after Natasha and her family survived the airship crash. And on top of that, we see him leading a SWAT team into an English language train terminal. Ross not only looks the same, he's wearing the same clothes and leading the same soldiers. So maybe he's not de-aged and Ross has just gotten some fillers. He's also walking with a cane, implying this is definitely not a flashback. This shot even looks like a small American town, like maybe where Natasha was hiding out at the beginning of the movie. But if he's also at this airship collapse, that would mean that he gets to slap the bracelets on Taskmaster. So maybe that means that he would recruit him to be on his own super special team of Dark Avengers. After Avengers Endgame, there basically are no Avengers anymore, so it makes sense that Ross would try to recruit his own team. A team that could be composed of former villains like Baron Zemo, Abomination, and Taskmaster. What are your Black Widow theories? Let me know in the comments below. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe. For Screen Crush, I'm Ryan Airy.